Welcome. It is so wonderful to be here with you this morning, talking about what it means to build a strategic sustainability portfolio and some of the difficulties and the opportunities of this moment. We have a great panel for you today. I'll introduce them in a second, but first, a couple of housekeeping things. We're going to try to have about 10-15 minutes for questions at the end, and we'll be able to stay a little bit longer if anybody wants to stay longer with us. We're going to try to keep things fun and interactive. So in addition to questions, we're going to have a couple of quick polls for you. I think the first one is going to launch here in just a second. So please follow along and send us your feedback and show everybody else, where it is that you're coming from and calling from and all of that. When it comes time for the Q&A, but really actually anytime as we go through the webinar, please feel free to type questions into the Q&A box that you should see to the right of your screen here, the right of the slides. As you go, we will be looking at them and sifting through them and kind of sorting and finding the ones that are, seems like there's a lot of interest in having us answer, and we'll pull them together. So without further ado, I would love to introduce you to our panel. You should be able to see everybody's video along the bottom. And if you can't see everybody, there might be a scroll bar that helps you move over to see everybody. So joining us today, we have Nick Kirby from Enveritas. Nick works with roasters and their suppliers to incorporate Enveritas's data-driven insights into their operations to drive sustainability impact and reduce cost. We've got Matt Brosio, who you don't see. He's calling in on his phone just because of bandwidth issues, but he's here with us. And he's the social responsibility manager at Peets Coffee, where he supports programs focused on responsible sourcing, coffee farmer training, and community development. And Matt's going to take us on a little bit of a journey today. We also have Frederick DeVry and Serene Nanavati of Ethos Agriculture, which is a consulting organization founded in 2017 that helps coffee companies build strategic partnerships and implement business development strategies that incorporate sustainability. And between the two of them, they have a few decades worth of experience in coffee sustainability with heavyweights like Rainforest Alliance, Root Capital, and COSA. And I am Hannah Neuschwander. I'm the communications director for World Coffee Research, and I'm going to kind of be your host today, helping with question moderation and participating in the panel too. And I actually wanted to say a quick word about why WCR is hosting this panel and how it sort of came to be. In my role, I work with a lot of companies talking about their sustainability investments. Most of the companies that support WCR do so out of their sustainability budgets. So these conversations may evolve because I'm talking to somebody who's already supporting our work, or we're working to see if it's a fit. Trying to understand how, my angle is usually trying to understand how WCR fits into people's overall strategy, and then how we can support them and help them tell their story about this investment that they're making with WCR. And through these conversations, I've learned over time that, a sad trombone sound, that very few of us have figured this out, and I include myself in this. And I think even the people that do, it is something that requires kind of continual attention and evolution. And I've had enough of these conversations over time, and as have my colleagues here on the panel, that we kind of thought together, people are really struggling with this. So maybe there's an opportunity here to get together and start a conversation about this moment that we find ourselves in, and some of what we're struggling with. And I think that level of grappling, it was borne out by the registrations. We were incredibly blown away that over 320 people registered for this webinar. So if you are here and if you are grappling with these questions, you are not alone. We are here together to start walking down this path. So I am going to kick us off with just the first slide here. We're here together this morning, and I'm just going to kind of pause and help us feel out, where are we exactly? So first of all, it's Wednesday. I know that days are hard to keep track of right now, at least for me. So it's been quite a year. And it seems like uncertainty is really the theme of the day. Whether, we're talking about COVID or the acceleration of climate change, or what kind of social upheaval is going to come at us next. As I was preparing for this webinar, I came across this amazing photograph. And something about it, when I saw it, it just like jumped out and resonated with me so much. And I don't know, I felt a kinship between this image and the moment that we're in. I think part of it has to do, right, with the fact that statues are literally falling all over the world as the legacy of racism and colonialism are being challenged, and as kind of the world itself feels a little bit upside down. So I started researching this photo, and it turns out to be offer a sort of great parable, I think, for the moment that we're in and the conversation that we're here together to have today. This particular statue fell a little bit ahead of its time. It fell 100 years ago. It's the statue of a guy named Louis Agassiz. He's a Swiss biologist and geologist who was a sort of, as many scientists were at that time, kind of prodigious person who studied all sorts of different elements of natural history. And he's especially known for his contribution to the taxonomy of fish, so like classifying fish on the, the Linnaean classification system. But he's also the father of glaciology. And it's because of him that scientists first accepted the idea that of ice ages, right? That the Earth goes through periods of dramatic global climate change, which was a foundational idea and concept for our eventual understanding of and acceptance of the idea of human-generated climate change. So in that regard, like kind of an important dude. At the same time, Agassiz was also a creationist who rejected Darwin and whose ideas laid the groundwork for the eugenics movement in the US and beyond. So another term for that is scientific racism. So in other words, his legacy, like the legacy of many of our prior engagements with sustainability and coffee, is complicated. A sort of cruel irony about him is that the huge part of his life's work was devoted to classifying fish species. And when you fast forward 100 years after his death, it turns out that scientists today have like really deeply questioned the entire classification system that he worked on, the Linnaean system. And so in some ways, a lot of his life's work amounted to nothing. And I think that is maybe the reason that many of us are here today together, right? We're trying to grapple with how to avoid a similar fate, like how to avoid being the equivalent of this statue, of having our investments and our efforts come to nothing. Incidentally, the statue wasn't taken down by activists. It came down in the 1906 California earthquake. And after it fell, one of his colleagues joked, you can see the quote there on the slide, that Agassiz and his ideas were great in the abstract, but not in the concrete, which I think is one of the greatest quips of all time. But I think it also can feel true about some of our efforts in sustainability, that the ideas can be great or seem really promising, but they're not always borne out in terms of impact. So in this particular moment in time, if we kind of go out to 30,000 feet, I think we can all sort of clearly see that there are really significant shifts taking place in the sustainability landscape, especially over the last 5 years. So today we're going to take a moment to kind of pause and look at, where do we really stand? What is on the horizon that gives us optimism? What can we do that will have impact and that will drive value? And think about what might be possible. So I'm going to turn it over now to Nick, who is going to help situate us in this moment.
Thank you, Hannah. I think the first step towards that sustainable coffee landscape that you're talking about is to take stock of where we are, to gain a real clear sense of where we stand today, and acknowledge that if our efforts are to be successful, they must begin from that point where we find ourselves in the present moment. And that means facing the uncomfortable truth that for as far as we've come, we still have a ways to go. We're still faced with challenges that can make sustainability seem out of reach. Such as those articulated here on the screen by the economist Jeffrey Sachs. Poverty, child labor, climate change, a lack of access to training and basic services continue to, in his words, paint a sobering picture of how far the sector has to go to become fully sustainable. And while it might be tempting to be cynical and consider a fully sustainable sector beyond reach, given these challenges among others, a sober assessment, as tough as it might be to accept for some, can also be the cornerstone of meaningful change, a real recognition of a path forward, away from the challenges of the past and towards a sustainable future. And if we're clear-eyed and honest about the things that are working, as well as the opportunities for continuous improvement, we can start to gain a clear sense of what that picture might actually look like. And so I wanted to show you one expression of that picture. So here is that sobering picture. And no, your screen isn't broken, so don't worry, even though it might look like that. But this is one way of looking at what the coffee producing world looks like. What you see here is a picture of 416 different coffee farming communities taken from over 50,000 surveys conducted in over 10 countries around the world last year. Each vertical line represents one community, one of those 416 communities around the world. And each of the horizontal bands represent one different aspect of sustainability. For example, poverty. You can also see that there's a color scale here, and that color scale represents a spectrum of risk, from very high risk in red, very high rates of poverty with respect to this band on the left, and lower risk in green. And we know that sustainability is not one thing, and that's a really important part of trying to demystify this broad topic, but to break it down into the relationship between economic, environmental, and social factors. And when you look at this picture, you can see that none of the communities are all green. So no community that has been surveyed by Enveritas around the world, is demonstrating a lack of sustainability risk across multiple different indicators. We also know that globally, 2 out of 5 farmers live in poverty. As we consider the issues that characterize sustainability, from things like deforestation to child labor, we can see that some issues, such as banned pesticides, minimum wage, are actually more prevalent in higher income communities. Whereas some other issues, such as clean water, productive trees, and access to training, tend to correlate pretty closely with poverty. And this data indicate that the sustainability tools in our toolkit are not working. They're not going to get us to a sustainable coffee sector. We want to see a picture of the coffee world that is entirely green across every aspect in every community. And these tools that we've been using for 30 plus years have got us to this picture. So we know that doing the same thing over and over again isn't going to work. But at the same time, with that recognition that we need to innovate, also comes the realization that not everyone has to solve every problem. We know that that's not going to work either. And what I want to suggest is that the key to impact is really to pick a lane, or pick 5 lanes. Pick a few lanes. You probably won't be able to pick all the lanes, but you can at least set a course in the right direction and build a portfolio approach that expresses your values in coordination with your partners to address the most pressing need. You can get into your lane and you can keep moving forward. And so with that, I want to pass it over to Matt Brasio at Peets to talk about what their journey has been like.
Hey, thank you, Nick, and hi everyone. Sorry I can't see you. I think Hannah mentioned that my connection isn't great working from home, so hopefully I'll do justice with the conversation that I can bring to this discussion. So as Nick mentioned before about taking stock of where we are, we did that at Peets. We started to take stock of where we were in terms of our sustainability and social responsibility investments, and we started that in the 2015 to 2016 period. And we started that process first by looking at who are the farmers that we're sourcing coffee from. So we were and we are sourcing from large farmers. We're sourcing from smallholder groups. So for example, cooperatives. We're also sourcing from smallholder farmers that are not affiliated with a cooperative or a group. They're essentially independent smallholder farmers. So for example, they're delivering coffee cherry to a mill for processing. And when we considered the tools in our toolbox at that time from a social responsibility, sustainability perspective, we had certification programs or certified coffee purchases. We had a direct trade approach to sourcing coffee, and we had individual community projects in our toolbox. But when we stop to think about, who are we reaching, who are we engaging, who are we supporting through these different sustainability frameworks or strategies, we felt like we were coming up short in terms of being able to connect with all the different farmers that we're working with. So from let's see here, from a certification program and direct trade perspective, we were only reaching large farmers and organized smallholders. And that's just a function of how those particular sustainability frameworks or programs are structured. They only work with organized groups of farmers, or in some cases like large farmers. And that meant that by pursuing those particular strategies, we were leaving out a large group of farmers that we source from, and a really important group of farmers. And just to drive home that point about the importance of smallholder farmers, and in particular, the independent, unaffiliated smallholders. These farmers produce 2/3 the world's coffee, so they're a really important part of the group of people that we're purchasing coffee from at Peets, and that the world relies on for coffee. So we just didn't have a framework. We weren't able to access and engage with farmers in that particular population through the existing tools in our toolbox. Now you might think, okay, well, what about community projects? Those might be a way to engage and support unaffiliated, independent smallholder farmers. And you're right. And we did employ that approach and that strategy. This picture here is of a daycare center that we support in Acatenango in Guatemala. And it supports about 50 children, and the children are the children of parents that largely work in the coffee sector. So it's certainly a way for us to connect with smallholder farmers, and in particular unaffiliated smallholder farmers. But we're also wondering, is that the best way that we can offer support to the communities where we're sourcing coffee from? And we didn't really have solid data to back that up and confirm that. And with a finite set of resources, we really wanted to make sure that we were making the right investments and creating meaningful impact and doing the best we could to support farmers at origin. So all of that is to say, we found ourselves in a situation after taking stock of the tools in our toolbox where we just felt that we were missing something, and we weren't able to fully connect and support the farmers that we rely on to run our business. And so it led us to a place of wanting to be more open to exploring potential new strategies and new ways of engaging in sustainability in coffee. So I'm going to stop there, and we'll come back to the Peets journey in a little while, but I'm going to turn this over to Frederick from Ethos, and he's going to walk us through a little bit of detail about how to embark on that strategy process.
Thanks, Matt, for sharing some very relevant insights around the start of Peets' journey. And obviously, Peet is not alone in this endeavor. With Ethos, we work with several organizations, companies, but also NGOs and donors that are facing similar challenges, that want to be more strategic in their sustainability investments, which maybe now is even more relevant than ever, realizing that due to economic uncertainty that Hannah already referred to, sustainability investments and budget might actually be at risk, while also considering that companies will probably no longer accept companies not to be ready for a global crisis. It really makes business sense as such to be prepared for unexpected scenarios that we're facing currently, but also unexpected scenarios that you might be encountering within your particular value chain, the struggles that your farmers are faced with, the risks that are associated with your value chain. climate change obviously being a relevant example going forward. So having this in mind, and now that realizing that markets across the world are slowly reopening, we feel this is actually a great opportunity as such, but also a good moment to rethink our current business practices, organizations as well as companies, to see if when moving forward we can really try to have sustainability more as an integrated part of how we are doing business, how we are working within Origin and across the chain, which is different than approaching sustainability more from a marketing perspective only, or just have it as a CSR proposition. So to support organizations within this required shift, what we do and what we advise organizations to do is to really think about what their specific sustainability approach might be, what their sustainability identity could be, how we refer to it. So what is really important to you? Where do you want to make a difference? Which can help as a reference point to make this required shift, and in this transition phase to really embrace sustainability as in our overall operations. So here are some guiding questions that can be used within this endeavor to explore what your sustainability identity might look like. Think about what you as an organization want to stand for, how you want to be recognized, the change you would like to see, and how you can actually embody the change. How can you use coffee as a tool to support social and environmental objectives? But also to think about how your mission is internalized across your value chain within your own organization, but also with partners. And how do you engage with your key constituencies, your employees, your clients, the consumers, but also the farmers within your mission? So when exploring these questions, and obviously also realizing and taking your current commitments and investments and value chain dynamics into account, this can help you to step by step slowly create your own kind of like sustainability story or sustainability narrative, which as such, and then we go to the next slide, can help you to slowly start to build or think about how a balanced sustainability approach could look like, how a authentic sustainability identity could look like, which we feel is quite instrumental to guide your investment, both current investment as well as future investments, to leverage your company assets. What are you already doing? What are you good at? How are you being recognized, and do more of that, while also drive the impact through the change. So more specifically, it can actually help you to bring some more consistency within your current portfolio, while also focusing on the interdependency between the different projects that you're involved in, both critical to achieve the meaningful and lasting results, as sometimes we're involved in one particular project, but it only works if it relates to other projects to really make the impact that we are looking for. When you have this sustainability story or identity established, you can also use this to inform your communication strategies, but also your partnership efforts to make sure that you attract the right stakeholders to really together focus on a particular goal that you want to make a difference. It can also be a great start to actually attract additional resources. When you have a clear story where you can make a difference, it's a great asset to tell to donors, to other organizations to join you and support and complement some of the investments you are making towards a shared goal. Related to that, it can help to identify where innovation is required, and build on innovative approaches to make progress on the goals that you are aiming at, either social or environmental objectives. And lastly, but also critically important, it can also help to build trust and credibility with your customers and your suppliers and employees as well, to develop a sustainability identity that they can actually relate to, which is actually quite important. Also realizing that consumers, but probably also employees more and more, are actually losing patience with those organizations that are not focused on ethical business practices. So this is really something where you can bring those elements together. So exploring these questions and really effectively delivering on this narrative, on your personal company-specific sustainability identity, also requires obviously that you are focused on the right interventions and that you use the right tools that really
fit this message and this story going forward. And Nick will therefore tell a little bit more about some of the tools that we have been using over the past, that most of us are quite familiar to, but also a little bit forward-looking and talking us through to some of the new opportunities coming up. So Nick, over to you.
Thank you, Frederick. Yeah, and just to take stock, I really like the way that you put that in terms of thinking more broadly about what can be accomplished with a very integrated and expansive sense of what sustainability means, and much like taking stock of the data that helps us understand where coffee producing communities are currently. I think it's also important to take stock of the tools that we have been using to date that are more familiar, which you can see here on the left, that have tended to maybe have a more limited scope and operate within the context primarily of an individual supply chain, or from the perspective of an individual company, as Matt was speaking to with the Peets experience, specific interventions with childcare facilities and the like, tend to just have that narrow focus. But we don't have to be limited to that anymore. And I think that's what's really exciting, and what Frederick is speaking to in terms of how we can reimagine the role of sustainability, not within a CSR context only, but as an integral part of how a coffee company does business, to weave it into the DNA of everyday operations. So moving from the limited scope of certification, which Matt was speaking to, that has enabled a lot of really, really important progress to take place, and has powered a lot of very, very meaningful initiatives, but it's limited in scope by definition. There are so many coffee farmers in the world who are not eligible for certification schemes. And so we are going to have to find a way to reach them, to engage those communities and bring them into the conversation around sustainability, and leverage the resources and the privilege and the opportunity that we have, leverage the platforms that we have as the coffee buying world, to form stronger partnerships and go beyond what's been possible before. And so beyond individual supply chain projects or programs, grants or community investment, going beyond just tracking our emissions and trying to measure and reduce waste, and starting to think more broadly about the ways we can just incorporate the ideas of stewardship and equity into every aspect of the decision-making process. And in so doing, as Frederick spoke to, really discover the value that exists therein, and that there's a lot more than just a marketing story to tell, but there's a really, really powerful opportunity to manage risk and to really guide business decision-making to lower costs and improve performance. And so a quick, a short list of some of these new tools. Obviously data, at Enveritas, we feel very strongly that having really, really good representative data is the first part of understanding how to begin this journey. So, the effort that we are undertaking to verify the entire coffee world, every major coffee producing region in the world within the next couple of years, efforts like the Transparent Trade Initiative to shed more light on where value is flowing in the industry, and then really exciting projects like World Coffee Research that represent a sort of collective action and a space to come together and leverage the resources and the unique positions that we all occupy in the industry to get us that much closer towards a sustainable coffee landscape. The improvements that technology, specifically around tools focused on transparency, offer a really exciting opportunity, to demystify coffee growers and help consumers and help decision makers within companies gain a much more comprehensive understanding of what the conditions are on the ground, and transparency that's not only limited to the tradable attributes of a coffee or the price that farmers receive, but real transparency and traceability into the issues at origin. So there can be a really open and honest discussion around what can be done to improve those conditions and address the challenges facing the most vulnerable people in the value chain. The different alternative pricing models that have been built on a lot of those new opportunities that technology is presenting are also really exciting. And then this idea of carbon insetting, not just measuring and reducing your own usage, but actually starting to capture carbon within the scope of your own supply chains. To really think powerfully, think ambitiously about what can be done, not only to just reduce, but actually start to manage, the emissions actively and reduce them within the scope of individual supply chains. And so, with that in mind, I think what I'm suggesting is not to throw out everything that's been done before or assume that it's all entirely flawed, but just to be open to building a balanced approach and to thinking more broadly about the ways that sustainability can drive business and is actually a very essential part of an essential of good decision making when it comes to those business decisions. So if we think about the goals that we can accomplish within the conversation around sustainability along a spectrum, with risk management on one side and really, really powerful impact on the other, we can start to think about all of these different tools contributing to that in a really balanced approach. And so once again, I will hand it over to Matt Brasio to talk about the Peets journey, building on this assessment of where they found themselves a few years ago, and now talk about where they want to go in the future.
Hey, thanks, Nick. So as Nick was talking about striking a balanced approach and incorporating old/familiar tools and new tools, after we took stock in that initial period, 2015 to 2016, we made some decisions about both work in both of those areas. So what are the techniques, approaches, strategies that we want to continue, and what are some new tools, what are some new strategies that we can employ? So the next couple of minutes I'm going to spend really focused on talking about the new tools and the new strategies that we've adopted in terms of trying to achieve a sustainable and socially responsible coffee supply chain. So that reflection, that initial reflection led us to Enveritas. As I mentioned earlier, our existing certification, direct trade strategies were not allowing us to connect with all of the farmers that we source from. With Enveritas's verification approach, we are able to connect and engage with all of the farmers, all the different farmer types that we work with. So large farmers, organized farmers, so for example, cooperatives, and then independent, unaffiliated smallholder farmers. So in Enveritas's verification process, there's a lot of detail here. Unfortunately, don't have enough time to get into all the details, so I'll do my best to try and summarize it right now. But essentially, Enveritas will survey the farmers in our supply chains according to 30 sustainability standards, and that's what you can see on the slide here, social, environmental, and economic. And Enveritas will survey, like I said, all of the different types of farmers that we're working with. But an important distinction that they offer in terms of our strategy is that they're able to reach the independent, unaffiliated smallholder farmers that are an important part of the group of farmers that we rely on to source coffee. The approach that Enveritas takes there is to survey farmers across an entire region, a geographic region. That's a really important distinction, and it was a big unlock for us. What do we get through that survey process? Well, we receive results that highlight social, environmental, and economic successes that the farmers that we source from are experiencing. And it also identifies some opportunities for improvement. Put another way, what we receive is not necessarily a pass-fail result. we receive results that place farmers that we're sourcing from and their sustainability performance, if you will. It places the farmers on a sustainability continuum. So we measure to understand where we're at, and then we have a starting point to move forward from there. In terms of how we're moving forward based on the results and the information that we got through the survey work, most importantly, we're using it as part of our engagement with the farmers that we work with. So we're sharing the results, we're discussing and prioritizing where there's opportunities for improvement, but we're also taking time to stop and celebrate what is going really well and what merits that kind of attention. And it also helps to inform the type of project work and collaboration that we're undertaking with the farmers and other supply chain actors that we work with, what kind of work we undertake going forward. So the metric that we're using to track sort of top-line progress in terms of our verification work is the amount of coffee that we've purchased that has been verified, that has gone through this evaluation process. So we started small. In the first year, we verified 20% of our coffee purchases. And I'm very happy to share that this year we'll hit 80% of our coffee purchases being verified through this process. And we're on a pathway to reach 100% of our coffee purchases. So look, during this period 2016 to 2018, we started acting on the information that we received through the survey work, the verification survey work right away. But we very quickly realized that, one, it's hard to do this work alone. It's hard to do this work, I'll call it impact and improvement work, without a well-organized plan and strategy. And ideally, we needed a plan and strategy that would help us really scale up that work over time. So we were lucky to have Enveritas really help us think through that problem, or that opportunity, if you will. And they were able to come up with a really structured way to help us think about how we could respond to verification results and work with and engage our many farmers in this program. So that's, let's see, enter part 2 of our program. I should say that this is maybe a little wonky. This is definitely a back-end view of our social responsibility programs. So bear with me, there's a bit of detail here. I'll try and keep it relatively simple. Let's see, what we're looking at here is essentially what I'll call our impact and improvement framework. So where our verification survey results are the what, this framework is the how. So think of this as Peets' roadmap for action. Once we have the verification survey results, then we have this plan that can help us determine what type of projects, what type of activities we can dive into in partnership with the farmers that we're sourcing from and with other supply chain partners, other supply chain actors. To stick with this road analogy, there are like five different lanes in this road. There's supplier engagement, collaborative initiatives, farmer support, financial inclusion, progress transparency. So supplier engagement at its core is engaging farmers and in the results of the verification program and making a plan together about what we can do to move forward in that sustainability journey. Collaborative initiative speaks to work done in collaboration with lots of stakeholders to address areas of opportunity within sustainability. So for example, tackling clean water access. Farmer support, this is maybe more specific to what type of project work or activities can Peets offer or invest in to offer training support for farmers. So for example, to offer training in coffee agronomy best practices. Financial inclusion speaks to work that can help farmers access, for example, credit at a bank. And progress transparency, that really speaks to the opportunity for a company like Peets to share what its goals are and what its commitments are, and then progress toward those goals and those commitments. And then on the top there, you can see act, measure, adapt, scale. Those are different stages of activity. So act is sort of the first step in that process of really scaling up investment and activity in impact and improvement work. So we just started using this framework last year. We're still kind of feeling our way through this approach. This is actually the first time that that we are sharing this framework publicly. So I probably have a little bit of work to do in terms of trying to convey what this framework entails. Hopefully you're sticking with me, but I'd certainly welcome your feedback and questions at the end of the presentation here. But anyways, we just adopted this, and right now we're working on mapping all of our current social responsibility and sustainability projects and activities according to this framework. We're finding that we're mostly in that very first phase, act, and we have a number of activities and projects that that can be categorized in those 5 different elements on the left. So one thing I should mention about this framework is that Enveritas is going to verify annually that Peets and our project implementation partners, that we've actually carried out the project work that we say we've done, and that 2, we are doing that work to a sufficient degree. It's creating this sort of added layer of accountability, and we think that's really, really important. Our perspective is that we're not going to move the needle on sustainability unless we are actually doing something and that the work is carried out to a sufficient degree. So Enveritas is really gonna check us and monitor us on that and keep us honest. All right, so look, this is probably a little, this is very high level. So let me move into a concrete example here. Let's use Guatemala as an example. So this is one of the origins that Peets sources coffee from. We've got the 5 impact and improvement elements over on the left. Let me start by sharing a little bit of detail that comes out of this baseline mapping that I mentioned. So the preliminary mapping results show that in the Guatemala context, we're doing a decent job of engaging our suppliers in the verification survey results. We have some collaborative work going on. So a really good example of that is the partnership that we have with World Coffee Research. And we're doing work to support farmers. TechnoServe is one of our key partners, one of our key project implementation partners in that work in Guatemala. The baseline mapping shows, however, that we have some opportunities that relates to projects and activities related to financial inclusion and also to progress transparency. All right, let me layer on top of that a quick snapshot of our 2020 verification survey results. So this is just, again, like a few examples of results that we've received. So clean water speaks to access to potable water. Pest and disease management speaks to whether or not farmers are employing best practices as it relates to managing pest and disease in terms of coffee plants. Access to training is whether or not farmers have access to training opportunities. So for example, best practices related to coffee agronomy. Sustainable production refers to crop yields. Access to finance refers to access to, like, for example, credit at a bank. I've sort of simplified there quite a bit. So looking at a snapshot of our results and looking at the baseline, we used the impact and improvement framework and our results from the verification survey work to really guide what we could do going forward in the 2020 to 2021 time period in Guatemala. So that's what's over here on the right side. So from a supplier engagement perspective, we want to continue to do that work of engaging our suppliers in the results of the verification work, strategizing with them in terms of, what's a priority, what can we act on together to move forward in that sustainability journey. But some of the results indicate that we've got an opportunity to really make a difference on some specific topics. So access to potable, clean water is one of those. So what we intend on doing in this time period is piloting a clean water access project. And we're going to target approximately 50 primary schools to be the points at which communities can access that clean water. But that decision comes directly out of the results that we obtained from our recent survey, our survey work with Enveritas. We're going to continue to, I'm going to jump around here, we're going to continue to invest in that farmer support. The results of our survey work indicates that's still an area of opportunity, so we're going to really double down on the project that we've had going with TechnoServe. We're going to triple the number of farmers that we access through this training project. We're going to offer training for approximately 3,000 farmers. We want to layer on top of that a training opportunity for coffee seedling nursery operators. And then I'll jump down to the very last item, progress transparency. Look, this is maybe not specific to Guatemala, but we recognize that that's sort of a global opportunity for Peets. We want to really invest time and energy in continuing to educate our employees about this sustainability strategy and this journey that we're on. And we've made a commitment to verify 100% of our coffee purchases according to this strategy and this process. And we want to keep going further, and we're trying to think through the specifics of that right now. I think for the sake of time, I probably have to leave it there. I'm going to turn this over to Soren from Ethos. He's going to speak a little bit about the importance of collaboration. And I should just note that all of that work that we're planning on doing in the 2020, the 2021 time period, it rests heavily on our ability to collaborate with many, many different partners at origin and in our supply chain. Okay, so with that, Soren, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Matt. This webinar is crescendoing, and we're getting to the punchline now of the title. How do we unlock the collaborative advantage? We have an opportunity as a community of like-minded individuals and organizations to do something special right now. And it's combining forces with other initiatives that are happening globally, such as the Sustainable Development Goals. First, let me define what the collaborative advantage is, or the way we say it. It's an ecosystem of partnerships that are all contributing, reinforcing activities towards a common goal. Each of these Sustainable Development Goals represent an opportunity for each of us to create this type of advantage. And as you can see in goal number 17, partnerships is important to be able to achieve the ambition of the SDGs. When thinking of creating a collaborative advantage, it's a strategy. And over the course of the summer, actually, as Ethos, we are contributing to a blog series on LinkedIn around how do you create a collaborative advantage, and that will be posted in the chat box. But there's 4 key components that we look at. One is identity, picking a lane, as Nick called it, and the questions that Frederick was reviewing earlier in the webinar are ways in which you can identify with a particular cause that is greater than just coffee. How do you use really coffee as a tool to achieve a social and environmental mission? From there, it's design. Designing approach is a lot like, it's a bit of trial and error. So when thinking of designing an approach, Nick referred to using data. And as you could see, Peets is very much involved in data-informed decision-making. That's extremely important in the empirical kind of design of your sustainability strategy. But you should also think about how to basically mine to the best of your ability the partnerships that you have and the potential partnerships that you want to create. And from there, you can think about how to properly engage those stakeholders and align them towards a common vision. So I'm going to go through this in a practical example, which we worked on in Rwanda over the past few years. Now, this example is going to focus on goal number 5, gender equality. And it is a way in which coffee has been used to promote women's economic development in Rwanda. A little bit of a backstory of this project is it started by Sustainable Harvest. Sustainable Harvest actually has worked with women producers in the coffee supply chain for 15, 20 years now. One of their flagship supply chains is actually with Peets. And over through that experience, they were able to understand what works and what doesn't, and had an opportunity with the government of Rwanda, with support from Bloomberg Philanthropy, to create a movement around how to use coffee to promote women economic development. So over the last 6 years, they took this identity of women-produced coffee, and then they designed an approach around it. There's a couple of really interesting things about their approach that they designed. One is they did not want it to be a project. They wanted it to be something that lasted beyond the project term. So 2 fundamental pillars of this approach was they established a local NGO called Sustainable Growers that was in charge of training cooperatives and farmers and helping align the various stakeholders around this common goal. And number 2, they launched a coffee company, a social enterprise called Question Coffee, that was promoting workforce development, training baristas, training hotels, restaurants, even Air Rwanda on how to properly educate consumers of coffee and where it comes from. And they have a cafe. And that cafe is really, if any of you've gone to Kigali, it's really become the place to go in Kigali. It's really interesting to see how, before this initiative started, they were saying that there wasn't much of a demand for specialty coffee in Rwanda. And now after, years of growth in the cafe, you can see that it's part of the culture, and there's not only a demand for it, but there is an opportunity to take coffee and show the entire supply chain, not just a piece of that supply chain in a country of origin. So with these 2 institutions, they were able to do the other 2 components of the collaborative advantage approach. So they first had the identity of women's economic development. Secondly, they had a strong design approach by establishing local institutions that were promoting domestic consumption and alignment of stakeholders, training farmers and training cooperatives. Then they engaged with the government, and not just with one aspect of the government, but with several government ministries, the Ministry of Tourism, of Gender, of Agriculture, of Commerce. And by bringing in all of these ministries, they were able to start showing the government how a commodity, an agriculture sector, can actually help achieve government goals. From there, they also engaged with research, with several different types of private sector partners, not just in the coffee sector, but in the technology sector, in the tourism sector. They have a few agro-tourism projects now that instead of just going to Rwanda for gorillas, you can go there and visit women-produced coffee farms and cooperatives to actually see the entire supply chain. And then lastly, it was around aligning all of these stakeholders so they can not only celebrate what they've done together, but also continue to create new approaches in which women can be engaged in the entire value chain, not just as producers, but as traders, as baristas, as roasters. And through this approach of engagement and alignment, they're able to evolve their strategy with not only lessons learned, but with the data that they're creating, with the data that they're analyzing, to now be able to go to their next phase. From there, I'm going to pass it to Hannah, and I think we're going to bring this webinar to a closing soon.
Thanks, Serene. So I'm going to try to zoom through these last 2 slides so that we have time for a few questions. If you have to jump at the hour, because we are running a little long, please go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A now. And even if you have to jump off, we will follow up with you with an answer to your question. We want to make sure that you have access to us. And then we'll also be posting a video recording of the whole webinar that'll go out by email afterwards. I love this example of Rwanda and how coordinated effort can produce really sort of transformational results at scale. And I think the question of scale is kind of the fundamental critical one when we think about some of the most difficult challenges that we face in coffee sustainability, because they are scale problems. They are extremely difficult to tackle within your own supply chain. A classic example of this is deforestation, right? It's very hard to tackle deforestation within a single supply chain. Typically, the most common tool that people use is like a zero tolerance policy, which means, if you cut down trees, we won't buy coffee from you. But zero tolerance doesn't actually solve the problem of deforestation. It just pushes it out of your supply chain and very possibly over into somebody else's. To actually solve that problem, there need to be alternative options for the farmer that outweigh the benefit of cutting down trees, which in many cases they may be doing in order to grow more coffee to get more income. When you think about deforestation in this way, it's a problem not just of sustainability, but it's a poverty problem. It's a low productivity problem. Climate change, I think, is the obvious other example of a scale problem, of this kind of wicked problem. If you don't invest in approaches to support farmers to remain farmers in the face of increasingly volatile and unpredictable weather, how many droughts or floods are they going to make it through? How many years of unpredictable weather before they have to call it quits? And there's very few coffee companies for whom it makes sense to build a breeding program to produce new varieties that will help farmers face down climate change. But there's no coffee company in the world that doesn't benefit from the existence of varieties like this being moved into the hands of farmers. So the success, of stating the obvious, but the success of any business that makes its money on coffee depends on the success of coffee farmers. Some of the challenges that they're facing are really, really difficult, broad scale, complicated, or what we call wicked problems. So in this context, I humbly offer up World Coffee Research as an example of the collaborative advantage in action. It's an organization that 8 years ago didn't exist, right? It just was not part of the landscape. But a group of competitors, of businesses, came together and said, we're not scientists, we're not experts, but we can see that every crop in the world invests in research and development to support its agricultural sector, to create varieties to address the challenges that farmers face, and also to respond to our own needs. And in coffee, some of that work, of course, exists in the form of national coffee research programs, but much of it is fragmented. Much of it is deeply underfunded, and a lot of it fundamentally feels out of reach or disconnected from the business of coffee, right? Like the buyers of coffee. So we're going to build this boat for ourselves to drive a global R&D agenda that's aligned to what we need: quality, long-term supply, origin diversity, and of course, fundamentally, response to farmers' needs, because again, if they're not successful, we cannot be. And there's really tremendous power in coming together like that, because your small investment, or it's small compared to what it would cost if you tried to do the same thing all by yourself, added together with the investments of others, really does add up to something. And just by showing up, just by sitting at the table with your peers, you unlock other investments, right? You can drive governments to spend money on the priorities that you have because you have shown up together. And this is one of the only ways that some of the most difficult problems are going to be addressed. And it is not the sexiest answer, right? It is not always fun. It is messy work sometimes, and it is difficult to row together in the same direction with, in particular, with your competitors. But it is incredibly powerful, and I think increasingly acknowledged, like globally and in the world of business, that it's really the only way that we're going to be able to deal with some of these more intractable problems. So there's doing sustainability, right? Which we do for lots of reasons. The moral imperative, because our customers are holding us accountable, because there is an increasingly urgent business case to do it. But most of us also do have to continuously make the case, right? To our bosses, to the CFO, and to capture back some of the investment in the sustainability work that we're doing via marketing. So most of us don't have a choice. You have to tell the story about your sustainability work. but how you tell the story matters. And I love looking at these two photos for this, right? On the left, you've just got this dude who's like yelling into the void, and like, is anyone even listening? It's not clear. On the right, you have a photo of this really cool thing from the Occupy Wall Street movement called the People's Mic. During the Occupy encampments, protesters were not allowed to set up amplification systems like big speakers. So when they needed to get a message out to the entire encampment, a speaker would stand at the front, and one sentence at a time, like call and response style, he would say the message that he needed the audience to hear. And the ring of people closest to him would repeat the sentence, amplifying it so that the next ring back could hear, and so on until the message had reached the end of the sea of people. And I love this example when I think about communicating about sustainability. If you have an audience that is with you because you have clearly conveyed what you are doing and it makes sense to people and why, and you have built trust and credibility with them, they will take your message and they will carry it for you. It's not necessarily the fastest way to get a message out, but it is a very durable way. And the other cool thing about this metaphor that I love is that it starts by speaking to the people closest to you. So in other words, building internal engagement and understanding with your own teams, your own leadership, your own employees, who then become your first and most important messengers. It's also a really nice, I think, metaphor for how the collaborative advantage works, right? It gives you the potential to amplify impact in the same way that the People's Mic amplifies your message, starting from just your one company within your own supply chain, but rippling out to combine with and gain power from the involvement of others until it reaches places that it couldn't go on its own. So this webinar, I guess, in some ways has been our little People's Mic to get us thinking about strategic sustainability and the collaborative advantage and what the possibilities are there. We're going to turn to questions. So there's a couple that have popped into the Q&A box. I do want to recognize that we are at time, and I apologize we didn't get to questions sooner. But if you're able to hang around and stick with us for a little while longer, we will delight in answering some of your questions. We're going to close as people are typing their questions with this last poll. Which area of sustainability are you struggling with the most? And potentially this may end up becoming the basis of a second or a follow-up webinar if people are interested. So let us know, send us a signal here about what you think has been the most challenging for you. We'll reflect that back to you guys as we go. And I am going to poke through some of the questions here and find ones that I think are relevant for the larger group and put them to the panel. So thank you all for being with us this morning, and we're excited to keep the conversation going. So the first question we had is, the Peets presentation is really interesting, using data to drive investment and sustainability, but it doesn't address the underserved communities and coffee growing areas, right? For example, like really difficult issues, maybe like women's health, which are difficult to prioritize when balancing them against things like coffee production, right? Like financing or clean water. So this is not necessarily a question for Matt. I think anybody could jump in and respond, but how would you guys respond to that? That sometimes it's easier to prioritize issues that are directly related, for example, to coffee production, like increasing the productivity of coffee farms, than it is the more difficult problems. Who wants to join in?
I'll happily jump in, Hannah. I mean, I've just like having done a lot of this work with Matt and with others, the data doesn't make the decision for the people in the conversation. The data simply presents, a level-headed, as objective as we possibly can, sort of perspective on what's going on. So it facilitates a really meaningful conversation that can enable that kind of prioritization. So if you know that you are privileging agronomy training and access to fertilizer and other inputs over a health program that might address, a really pressing issue in that community, then everyone's doing that with a clear sense of that trade-off. And so I think that's what we are striving to do with the data that we collect and the type of supplier engagement that we facilitate, is to simply empower everyone in that conversation to know what everybody else is looking at. And from there, you can have a really meaningful, design. As Sarian was talking about, in Rwanda, where there's a sense of what the landscape looks like, and if everybody's on the same ground, then they can all move forward together. But you know that you can't move in every direction together. So those trade-offs are a real part of it.
Maybe I can add.
Nick, it's Matt. I can
go ahead, Matt.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Soren.
No, please, Matt. No problem.
Oh, okay, just to piggyback on Nick's comments. I mean, just an example in terms of how this plays out for us at Peets. So we've got the survey results, which are organized according to the 30 Enveritas sustainability standards. We have a conversation with the suppliers, the farmers that we're working with, and we go over that information. And I think to Nick's point, we put it all out there and we have a discussion about where we're at, and then collaborate on what are the areas of opportunity, what should we prioritize, and then make some decisions from there about what we can focus our energies on, and the strategies to employ. So just adding a little bit on to what Nick shared.
Just
Serene, were you going to jump in there?
Yeah, just 2 quick points. One is there is a ripple effect. So when you start with one particular initiative, and farming communities actually see that that's working, it does provide an opportunity for other initiatives to piggyback on that. And women's health is definitely something that we've seen an example around. The other point is, well, what's the vehicle if it's not if it's not the northern markets that are driving it? Well, cooperatives are an excellent rural institution, and some cooperatives obviously are more sophisticated than others, but we've seen wonderful examples of cooperatives being able to set up social programs in which they are servicing their the needs of their members and non-members through different types of partnerships, and obviously even raising resources to deliver projects. I feel very strongly that cooperatives should really start taking the place of a lot of the work that international NGOs have done historically. It is a little bit of a longer term strategy. However, as the world's changing and there's less traveling going on and less expats living in other countries, perhaps this is an opportunity for us to really start thinking about how we can build the capacity of cooperatives, associations, social enterprise agribusinesses to create the right, not only the right strategies, but to have the right vehicle to deliver activities beyond just sourcing coffee.
Mm-hmm. So we have a follow-up question about, given the challenge that's sort of facing the world right now financially in terms of the impacts of the coronavirus and what that's doing for the bottom line for some companies, how do we, Saran, you touched on this very briefly in your comments, but, how do we avoid pushing off dealing with some of these really critical problems that are urgent right now for many farmers, but are maybe seem more challenging for companies to take action on?
I think we're all learning how to do this over the last few months. I personally have spent the majority of my career on the road, and most of the mission that I've had in the work that I've done in terms of training and capacity building has been passing the baton to the communities that we're working with. Now that to be honest, it's a paternalistic way of looking at development and really rethinking how you don't pass the baton, but you start with investing in the community, and really supporting them to achieve the goals that they want to achieve. This is going to require obviously a lot more hiring at the local level, lot more knowledge sharing through a variety of different means, whatever works, essentially. For WhatsApp's the technology that works, then use WhatsApp to the best of the ability to transfer the information that you need to transfer. And then lastly is having more representation of what's working and what's not from the local stakeholders. So then we could all not be in the position of presenting, but be in the position of listening and figuring out what support services and structures we can offer them.
Mm-hmm. And I'll add one additional comment there. I think Saran also touched on this, but I think when you think about driving forward sustainability within an organization, something that I've noticed over time as I work with a lot of, the companies that support WCR to think about their sustainability and talk about it. Even today, this is changing to some degree, but even today, the majority of the funding that comes to us, at least, is coming out of people's sustainability budgets. And the majority of those budgets are marketing budgets. And I think, the old adage of follow the money, that tells you something about the way that many companies are positioning sustainability, that they're not seeing it, or they're not, I think they increasingly are seeing it as a core business concern. But if, for sustainability, for these kinds of really difficult problems to truly have traction, I think in the long run, they need to be understood as fundamentally as business problems, because they are fundamentally business problems. They are not fundamentally marketing problems, right? Nick mentioned the spectrum between risk management and impact. And we started with understanding, many of us, sustainability as maybe not the ones doing the work, but embedded within our companies as primarily a risk management issue, right? We can't have deforestation in our supply chain. And I think anymore, and with the acceleration of climate change, there is a changing perception of the fact that sustainable supply chains are strong supply chains, that when you have sustainability, you also have insight, you have more traceability and transparency into what's happening in your supply chain, which allows you to be resilient in the face of a global crisis like the coronavirus, right? There's a great McKinsey article, whatever you think about McKinsey, there was a great McKinsey article that basically said the coronavirus is climate change on super fast forward. Whatever's happening to your supply chain right now because of coronavirus is what will happen to your supply chain over the long term because of climate change. And I think that's a really interesting insight to consider. We'll go for 3 more minutes till 1:15, and then, like I said, we will follow up with folks of individual questions. I think a theme that I'm seeing in a couple of the questions is about this question of scale, but from the perspective of roasters. Like, if you are a small roaster, if you're not sustainable harvest, how do, or a Peets, how do you begin to engage with some of these issues that are scale issues that are going to be really hard to do on your own? Does anybody want to offer some thoughts or insight about that?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's a great question, and obviously, I think that there's always a balance between you as an organization want to stand out and want a individual project to really showcase both internally as well as externally. But in some cases, it might be, depending on what you want to focus on, depending on where you are, the difference that you want to make, it might also be more beneficial to actually try to work with some of the initiatives that are already happening on the ground, or either in origin or supported by some more global NGOs. There are different coalitions focused on climate change. There are coalitions focused on gender equality. There are quite a number of international and regional initiatives that you can relate to. And there are different resources that you can access. And I think Nick actually shared one around sustainability catalog that kind of hints a little bit what's happening where and what could you potentially join. So that might be a good way forward.
Just to add a little bit to what Fred just said, many of the projects that have supported coffee communities in the past struggle with market access. So you'll have all the training, all the communication content, all the data that you're looking for to really demonstrate that you're being responsible in your sourcing, if you just purchase from these projects. And it's a great way to engage farmers and give them feedback on what's working and what's not. And it's always a heartbreaker too to see how much work happens in these projects and the improvements in productivity and quality. So just by talking to your importer, whoever you're sourcing green from, and asking, are there any special projects that are aligned with your own ethos, with your own social and environmental mission, could be a great way to just leverage what's already going on.
And I'll add one additional insight that came up actually in a comment that somebody sent into the Q&A, which is that, and it touches on what Serene just said, is that often suppliers are also engaged in these programs. So whether it's a unique program that they've built themselves as an exporter, or whether it's something that they're collaborating with a larger group in, like the program in Rwanda, that very often by working with your importer or talking to your importer or your exporters, you may find that there are opportunities that are available to you just by virtue of the work that they're already doing, and that you can tap into that because so much is happening. Okay, so we have taken up plenty of your morning or evening, depending on where you're calling in from. We are so grateful to you all for being here with us. I want to acknowledge that obviously we are not the first people to think about this idea of collaboration and strategic sustainability, but it is, I think, a conversation that needs to be refreshed kind of continually, right? The world is changing around us. The tools available to us are changing all the time, and it makes sense to continue to kind of grapple with it and move forward with it. So we're thankful for you being here. We will follow up with a video recording and with answers to the questions we didn't get to, and we hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Please, I totally failed to put this up earlier, but these are our emails. If you have individual questions for us that you didn't post in the chat, please feel free to reach out to any of us. We would be delighted to talk to you. And yeah, we will hopefully talk to you all soon over a video call. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This one sec, the emails, and then we'll shut. Bye.
Bye-bye.